Now it's my pleasure to introduce one of the fathers of, intellectual fathers of the concept of smart specialization, and not just that, one that has been monitoring throughout the whole process how this smart specialization has grown and has become mainstream in policy. DominiqueForay, who is a professor at the Ecole Polythecnique Féderale de Lausanne. So without further ado, Dominique.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So, thanks very much for the design invitation. Thanks, Roberta, for having made the relations and all the organizers. I'm very pleased to be here. Of course, as all my colleagues here, we like to come in Italy in these wonderful cities. Maybe after the first very illuminating speech of Fabrizio, I like to set a little bit the fundamentals in 10 minutes about what we really thought. So the fundamentals of smart specialization and the very simple idea which was at the beginning of the process with this little paper that I wrote with Paul David and Paul, also Bart van Haak was involved in that during our period in the Knowledge for Growth expert group who advised the Janis Potocznik at the Commission. And so the really simple idea we had in the beginning was really that region should build capabilities. You know, it's not really extraordinary idea. So building capabilities, building competencies, but not general capabilities, such as, not only general capabilities, such as, you know, encouraging SMEs to develop an innovative culture, or, you know, helping universities to accelerate transfer of technologies. All these general things are done, are important. But what we were thinking is building capabilities in specific domains, specific subsystems, specific technologies. And in a sense, this is the main novelty of our idea of smart specialization. Shifting from what we could call a horizontal policy logic, where you try to improve the general conditions of a regional system, shifting from this horizontal policy to a more vertical one, where you try to target domains, fields, technologies, etc. And this sounds like a technical detail, so not very important, but this has a lot of implications in terms of design and implementation of the policy, and also in terms of the expected social returns that we can hope for this kind of innovation regional policy. And so, in a sense, the very nature of smart specialization and what Fabrizio says, so it has been a real change in the culture of the policymakers, has been this shift. You know, not helping everyone, everywhere in the region, but trying to target different kind of things. And why did we think it is important to have this shift? Well, I mean, because for the last 20 years of this European Regional Development Fund spending on some kind of R&D innovation targets, nothing's happened really in most of the less advanced and transition regions. Nothing happened really in Galicia, in Lausanne, in Puglia maybe, in north of Portugal, etc. And a lot of money has been spent actually. And so this is quite crude picture, but you know, this is how the money was spent, more or less, you know. This was the dominant logic, horizontal policy, which means, in a sense, to be neutral, to avoid any, you know, choices which could interfere with market forces, and so to avoid any preferential intervention in terms of fields, technology, etc. So to try to, in a sense, be neutral. Why do policymakers wanted to do that, and why mainstream economists like this? Because, you know, at least we don't interfere with market forces, and we don't guess about future development of markets. And so the risk of making failures, the risk of picking the winners, the risk of distortions are minimized because we keep this neutrality in a sense. The problem is that it did not deliver extraordinary results for many regions, at least the less developed and the transition region. And it has been a very good evaluation by Heinrich and colleagues in Leuven, we see that in many cases, even the knowledge gap has not been really improved between these less developed regions and the top regions. And second, when in some cases the knowledge gap has been a little bit improved, like here, we see some improvement in some of the framework conditions, then these regions had difficulties to translate this improvement into real economic convergence and progress. And this is really the last Heinrich papers on the transition regions. And we think that this is the case when the improvement of this knowledge infrastructure, so this horizontal policy, was really about the public sector, actually. Improving universities, the program, which is fine, actually. I don't say we should not do that, okay? But it did not really deliver what it was hoped. And in a sense, there is not such thing that, a magical effect of this knowledge infrastructure improvement on economic growth through, some kind of spillovers. These spillovers did not really happen. And so shifting from this logic to the other logic, which is, okay, let's try to be more specific, to be more focused, to really identify a couple of domains, not only, making everything equal for everybody. Then we have two problems to solve, and this is what smart specialization is about. The problem of capability formations, not in general, but for subsystems, for some specific technologies, and this involves issue of scale, agglomeration economies, networks, institutional diversity, so all the ingredients of a microsystem of innovation, how to support the emergence of a microsystem of innovation in some specific fields. But then we have, and this problem is really the second phase of smart specialization, if you wish. But the first problem is identification, of course, and it has been already said. So where do we want to put the money to, concentrate resources to build these capabilities, to set priorities? Where do we want to generate some extra incentives so that this part of the system will respond to that? And of course, solving this identification problem is the first phase of smart specialization. This was really what was supposed to happen in all regions in Europe. This reflexivity on my system, where do I want to see my system in the future, etc. So the problem of building capabilities, agglomeration, microsystem innovation, is well known, and for a long time now, with this kind of place-based innovation approach, it is practiced with this cluster policy. Maybe it's too much practice, actually. We have so many clusters in Europe, and it's too much practice because precisely policymakers tend to forget the first problem, which is identification. Where do we want to have this cluster? Not necessarily, in biotech, nanotech, ICT, as the business as usual response is. And so the identification problem is difficult because we are in this kind of vertical logic. So policymakers have to make choices, and to get a societal consensus about these choices, which is of course quite difficult, making choice between fields, between technologies, etc. And what we expect in a sense that the selected domains or the selected fields will be related to the existing structure. So it will be not, something coming from scratch. It might be. It is not an obligation to be related to the existing structures, but this is what is likely to happen. And on Oshma, Kuhn, Franken, etc., they have developed this related variety framework. We see quite clearly that regions creates diversification, transition, through a branching process from one activity to a new one, which are related. So the selected domain should be related to the existing structures, but the goal of this domain, of these domains, should be to transform these structures. And so we have these two things, related to the existing structures, but the goal is to transform these structures. And finally, in any case, this identification problem should be solved with this kind of self-discovery, entrepreneurial discovery process, and I will come on this soon. Entrepreneurial discovery, this is not new at all. From Hirschwein, to Osman and Roderick, of course, it is a concept which is quite, but it's difficult to operationalize, of course. I think that policymakers have been petrified by this concept, which is very academic, actually. very difficult to understand and to implement in the practice, and that's probably something we should discuss with you. And so then, just to cap it all, so the first phase was this one, and so this was quite disappointed in terms of results from these decades of horizontal policy, and we shift to this kind of things, which are, you know, the selection of a few domains where capabilities will be built, domains which are connected to existing structures, I don't know, fisheries, footwear industry, breeding, but the goal of these new priorities are to transform these sectors, to transform the structures. And these are real examples, you know, coming from Galicia, from Limousin, and from north of Portugal, and this is things that are put in their smart specialization strategy. And the idea is really to make new activities emerging from the connection between firms, research, users, etc., to structure the knowledge, science, technology, entrepreneurial knowledge which is dispersed, divided, to create bridges between this kind of new domains and external sources of competences, etc., etc. And we predict, of course, we cannot measure yet, but we predict that, in a sense, spillovers are likely to materialize because the new projects are complementing existing structures, so we have a clear relation, and the activities or sectors which are developed are connected with others, and so innovations which will be produced here can diffuse to the rest of the economy, etc., etc. And so in each of these cases, so biotech and fisheries or footwear industries and advanced manufacturing technology, we have always these two phases. So it's very, I think it's key, smart specialization has two phases, building capabilities and driving structural changes. And the two phases are of equal importance here. Building capabilities, for example, in developing biotech application for fisheries, and structural changes, which will be modernization of fisheries. So, and the two things are important. And of course, one region can import all factors for structural changes. Of course, I mean, it's possible if you don't have the capabilities at all, and if you don't want to build these capabilities, it's too difficult. So you can import everything, but we will say it's not smart specialization. It's might be fine, but it is not. An example, because I saw that there is a session about tourism and smart specialization. I really interacted with a region in France, which is la région centre, you know, with all the castles, you know, etc. And so they wanted, of course, to put tourism in their smart specialization strategy. And the idea was to modernize tourism, of course, you know, increasing operational efficiency, etc. But there was no ICT company in the région centre to develop applications, etc. So, but this is fine, they have to modernize their tourism sector. Of course they have to. And of course they will buy consultancies, development from other, from companies based in other regions, etc. And this is fine, of course they have to do that. But this is not smart specialization. They have to do that as a sectoral policy, but because they don't build capabilities in the region, you know, they will generate structural transformation, but without building capabilities, and so it should not be in the smart specialization strategy. But in many cases, regions are importing some factors and building capabilities, and here we have this mix of, you know, external and internal resources, and that is what we think is important. And so here we are, and I will conclude more or less now in a sense. So the very simple idea is to encourage capabilities formation in specific fields, in specific technologies. Because the starting point is a certain disappointment about how the policy was implemented before, you know, with this horizontal kind of spreading the money over everybody with no impact at the end. But shifting the logic from horizontal to vertical implies so these problems of building capabilities in microsystems in specific fields, and in particular the problem of identification, so of these domains of priorities. And we think, and what we see, that in most cases the domains are related to existing structures, but the goal is to transform these structures, and so you have these two sides. And so we can define smart specialization strategy as putting in place a process in each region, and this is what the regions had to do for the last 2 years, putting in place a process whereby such a dynamics of development, new specialty developments like biotech for fisheries, for example, can be facilitated thanks to preferential intervention to support the most promising new activities. Of course, mainstream economists will criticize that, and here you have our great colleague Anne Kruger, who likes, to kill all these economists who, wants this kind of strategic intervention by government. And she said what it would be preferable to allocate scarce capital so that some activities have excellent infrastructures while others must manage with seriously deficient structures is not clear. It would appear to be a distortion, which means that in a sense we are facing this kind of critical comments which are quite predictable. If the regions is to make choices, then we have a risk of policy capture, we have a risk of picking winners, etc. And the response to Anne Kruger has been really about the design of this policy. And this is here where we have this idea of self-orientable discovery and other kind of design principles, which are extremely important to follow to precisely make compatible these two logics of political actions, providing possibilities for regions to decide and undertake strategic actions. For example, I want to modernize my fisheries with biotech application, so this is strategic actions, but to make compatible that with, what is now the way people are thinking about innovation, the value of decentralized experiments, entrepreneurship, entry competition, etc., etc. And so, to make these two things compatible, you need to have this interval discovery principle, for example, as well as a couple of others things which are here. Now I have all these things, but just on interval discovery or self-discovery, I think the idea is very simple, but it's very difficult to implement. It is really that, in a sense, we think that the government does not have any wisdom about what to do, actually. This is not the role of the government to decide what to do. And the policy process we like to build is not the one in which the government decide what to do and set the incentives so that the firms will execute the plan. No, the discovering what to do is part of the policy problem. And this is what we call interval discovery, actually. Discovering what to do is part, and this is not in the cabinet office that it has to be decided. And so we need these strong interactions between the government and the private sector to produce the information about the most promising domains where these priorities have to be set, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I stop here. I just want to show you, this is all the others, but it's final note of optimism. Optimism, this is about this guy, so he will have the floor. The pessimism, of course, after 2 years, I was very involved in the implementation, as many people here. After 2 years of interaction, particularly in French-speaking regions, it's clear that it would be hard to say that regional governments are fully mastering the mystery of smart specialization with interval discovery, granularity, etc. Because it is a very sophisticated process. And so to master the sophisticated process, we need sophisticated regional capabilities. In some countries, it's clear at regional level there is no of this kind of capabilities. I was invited in how regions are understanding the notion of interval discovery, etc. They were not listening to us because they were in a hurry, in rush, they wanted to implement it immediately. And so I think that this lived implementation issue in the regions as absolutely a critical challenge.